and then suddenly in Sully or in his universe, the planets didn't align. And he found himself heartbroken with a long-term girlfriend and the breakup and everything. And so we were to come back, we go Monday through Friday when we write and have the weekend off, and we get the call on Sunday. Have a nice summer. I'm splitting, going back to Boston. Right. So we were like, oh shit. And, and he told us, of course, what happened, which was a breakup. And me and Tony Robbie looked at each other. We knew it. That's when, we're going to get hits now. Now the shit got real, and my boy will go and he'll take his pain, and he'll be in pain. And so it sucks as a friend of his for so long. We're like brothers, man. And it sucks to see him go through it. But every time I'm like, man, he's going to write some real shit, and it's going to be a hit.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to 2020, and we are super pumped for part 2 with our good friend Shannon Larkin. If you have not seen part 1 of the previous episode, definitely go back, check that out. We've been checking in, talking Godsmack, talking the Apocalypse Blues revival, Ugly Kid Joe, all that good stuff.
Number ones.
Yeah, it's a few number ones kicking around.
Most importantly, about reaching your peaks, about living in freedom, about pursuing the things. I mean, I think that's what I really took out of part 1, but we can continue on the conversation.
Yeah, but Blabbermouth wants to hear about the number 1 single that's beating out Metallica right now. And so we should give them that soundbite of Sully Erna did it again with his amazing band of incredible Jedis with our friend Shannon Larkin on drums. And he'll continue to do it for the rest of this record because they're just awesome. And now back to the sentimental, poignant part.
I'll tell you what. I love it. It's even Godsmack to me is wonder and awe, man. I'll tell this cool thing, and then I'll get to another story I have for you guys. But when we were doing the new record, we came in January of 21 and did 3 months, and we wrote like 10, 11 songs. A pretty decent set of music for starters, for a new record. And and then suddenly in Sully or in his universe, the planets didn't align. And he found himself heartbroken with a long-term girlfriend and the breakup and everything. And so we were to come back, we go Monday through Friday when we write and have the weekend off, and we get the call on Sunday, have a nice summer. I'm splitting, going back to Boston, right? So we were like, oh, shit. And, and he told us, of course, what happened, which was a breakup. And me and Tony Robbie looked at each other. We knew it. That's when, we're going to get hits now. Now the shit got real, and my boy will go and he'll take his pain, and he'll be in pain. And so it sucks as a friend of his for so long. We're like brothers, man. And it sucks to see him go through it. But every time I'm like, man, he's going to write some real shit, and it's going to be a hit, because that's what happens is like his lyrics are brilliant in that, they're very, direct, like almost blue collar lyrics to where he can touch middle America and rock bands, and he's like the hard rock Bruce Springsteen or some shit. You know what I mean? Like he can touch dudes. And so anyway, then that 3-month thing happened, and he came back, of course, with like 6 new songs that ended up being, on the record. And the last one was the one that I feel is going to be the next single and the next number 1. I'll say it out loud right there. And then who knows what happens after that. But, it's a badass song. And it was written in one day. We needed one more song for the record. And so he came in, he had this thing, and had this cool riff, right? And it just literally, I showed up that morning and we just knew that we didn't have anything else, but that we really loved. We had other songs that were just like, And so, and he had that one riff. So he was jamming this riff. And by the time I showed up, Tony was already there, and they were already on to the second riff of it. The beat I threw on there, and I do this Zeppelin like type John Bonham type thing at the top of the song with their riff, and it sounded really cool. It all came together, like I said, in one day. Literally, the arrangement that went on the record, and we're in the studio, so we recorded it the very next day, and so I'm rooting for it. You know what I mean? I love it.
Is this like you're paranoid from like Black Sabbath, where you're gonna be like, oh yeah, no, we just in an hour, we're hanging out, and we're like, oh, let's roll the tape. Finished with my woman.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely. It took a lot of. We stayed there for 10 hours that day though to finish it. And no one wanted to leave. Like we were all. It's an interesting, cool song. And he got a vocal hit right away, which usually doesn't, it takes him usually a while to get a hit on it where like he has a melody, and he's very particular, and that's why it takes so long to write songs and records, is because he doesn't like to, he's very, I wouldn't say self-conscious, but very particular about every word. You know what I mean? It's almost a game to him that he has to, or a puzzle rather, that he has to solve, lyrically. Because, there's lyricists, there's cadences, there's melody, but then there's also vibe, you know what I mean? And he goes really deep into like, himself. And he smoked pot with us this time. It was really fun. It was the funnest record we did, man, I tell you. All the years or whatever, all the records, it was definitely the funnest one with the least bit of drama. We got that dude Mudrock back in. But anyway,
I don't know if we're allowed to say this, but I just remember hanging out. We can cut this out if this is not okay, but I remember you saying something to me to the effect of, when Sully started dating Lady Gaga, she got him to finally smoke, and that was great. Is that a true story?
Yeah, that's true, and that's not, I don't think, a secret. I don't think Sully would bum out if people knew he dated Lady Gaga. I mean, she's hot and she's mega talented. So
she's unbelievable. Like, how could you? Yeah. Like, why would he not be proud of that? Like, it's seriously, like, if you want to say, like,
he's not, as much as I love, he's not like Tommy Lee or whatever or whoever the guy is now.
None of us are like Tommy Lee, man.
None of us.
Unless you're packing something else that I don't know about.
What I mean is by that is Travis Barker, Tommy Lee, whatever. It's dudes that have public girlfriends that are super famous too, and then they're different than Sully. Sully's East Coast guy. He's like me and Tony Robbie. We're East Coast dudes, and so I don't
More
know.
Low key, I guess.
LA bands, and West Coast dudes. They have flashier maybe, and their rock starism is more David Lee Roth than, I don't know, Eddie Vedder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're more Eddie Vedder, even though we're East Coast, So we're probably even flashier than Eddie, he'll show up in an army jacket on your ass. You don't even recognize him. Oh my God, that's Eddie Vedder. So we're in between them and the dudes with the flashy girls on our arms. But anyway, so did he date her? Yeah. But did he ever tell anyone? No. Except for his friends and us. The band, we knew.
Well, but I'm saying it took her poker face to get him to light up. Or lighten up. I'm not sure which one. Is it a metaphor or did it really happen?
Poker face, what?
That's her first, that was her single. Poker Face.
Oh yeah, Poker Face. I got the poker face. I got the poker face.
Yeah, she's amazing. I love Michelle. That's what I call her after watching the Netflix special.
All I know is yes, that 5'2" thing. She's
amazing,
amazingly awesome, fierce. But yeah, and so it was a brief thing, by the way. And I could tell you stories that I can't tell you. Someday I'll do.
We'll save it for off the air.
Yeah.
I will ask one more if you can tell us this, because Cory and I, we used to love the Shannon nighttime like lullabies where you'd come in, and smoke with us and finally sit down and tell us more stories about being on the road. And you told the greatest Van Halen stories between Alex Van Halen, Whitfield Crane, and Eddie Van Halen. Can you tell? You finally got me, because I never know what Alex Van Halen's actually like, because he's always been so quiet and just the guy playing incredible drums. But you made him come to life for me. Can you speak to Alex Van Halen?
Yeah, and he was so smart and like weird,
How's he weird?
Like well, I say weird, but in now looking back, that was 30 years ago. Almost. And so looking back now with the knowledge that we have now and the way the world looks now, he might have been right, but he was definitely in the conspiracy theories of the highways underneath the United States that connected Houston with DC and the aliens, and and boy, he was intense about it too. And every day I would look forward to catering, and I hope I got to sit with Alex again so he could just talk. I never said a word. I'd sit there, smile on my face, like, this dude is the king. But he was very animated, and you think he's the shy brother or whatever. He's not shy, dude. He would smoke cigarettes, chain smoke them, put them out on his hand as he's saying some intense shit. I'm serious. And he would light the next cigarette. He'd chain smoke after he ate. And then as he'd light the next one, have it in his mouth and put that motherfucker out on his hand while he'd look at me.
Dude, can I tell you a true story? You told me that story, and then I was really baked, and I was like, I'm going to try putting this out in my hand. And I actually burned the fuck out of my hand. Like, how the hell does Alex Van Halen just casually put this out? I'm like, saying, oh, isn't it cool that I'm just like casually burning myself? Don't try it at home, kids.
It wasn't casual. He went, like he was showing me that he was doing it. And I think, he had probably calloused his hands up, you know what I mean?
Clearly.
From playing drums. Because when you're on tour for a while, you get these big fucking calluses on your fingers, But he was doing it over here on his palm, so maybe he also liked to do that for many years, and so it's good and calloused there now too. You know what I mean? It's like somebody who, if you drink a case of beer a day and you're doing twist off bottle caps, you can get callus right here in the nook of your hand where you twist, 24 beers.
Oh yeah, if you're like a samurai warrior hitting your head against the wall for 5 minutes a day, then finally you can just smash people with your skull when you're 60.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I had if you look at some of those shirts I sent you, Benny, I collect all these t-shirts all my life, and some shirts are 20, 30 years old, literally, Night of the Living Dead or whatever. And so I started noticing these just little tears on the bottom right, little holes on the bottom right of my t-shirts. And they were all just these shirts they were not cut up punk rock, ified by me. And all of a sudden, these holes, and I really couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I don't know what could cause that, right? And then it wasn't until months later on tour, and I was trying to open a Corona, which isn't a twist off. And I pull my shirt up, and I'd open doors like that. Boom. And to the extent all my shirts, I have little holes on the right side of them, man. Yeah. You're a drinker.
That's amazing.
I was a beer drinker. I'm a sober guy.
We were talking about this on the last show. You were saying how being a rock star and climbing the mountain is not having any boss. And I think that the cool thing that I've learned about you is that you have spent your life helping other people realize their dreams. You know what I mean? And realize their songs. So Sully Erna comes in with a riff or whatever, and you bring it to life, but you're bringing his ideas and coloring them in. Whereas with the Apocalypse, you literally dreamed these songs up. Like you told me, and then you can speak to it, but you would call me and you sent me these lyrics to a song called Jack the Tripper, which is, they're always really interesting names to songs. And you're like, I wrote this in a dream, and I've been thinking about this song forever. And finally, it just came to me, and I just started automatic writing it. And these songs, I've never listened to lyrics. But now having been in your band, you'll call me and be like, so know when the lyric goes, and insert anything from the record. No, I don't. So I went and studied everything, and I realized that you are one of the greatest lyricists ever. And it's incredible because thinking about it, it just comes from your subconscious. Can you speak to how that comes out?
Well, I tell you what, thank you firstly, Benny, because that's makes me feel so good. I've always written lyrics, always loved to do it, always get in bands where the singer wants to do it. That's the nature of the beast. If you're not a singer and you're a drummer, it's rare to be in Rush. Right, that's what I just said. Yeah. See, and I thought that maybe, I even said to Benny one time, and it was Benny who said, it's just your subconscious, dude. That's what's, it's you. Because I was like, I know when it's a good lyric. And as Benny could tell you, I've kept my lyrics since, my God, forever. And so, most of those didn't turn into songs because they aren't great. Are they good and deep or whatever? I mean, that part of my life, they're like markers in my life, my lyrics. And so, and they change, and sometimes, like, I'll go back, that song Optimistic off the last record, that was from maybe 30 years ago, some of those lyrics that come out. Snake Charmer I've had for 15 years. And you know what I mean? And it took me that long to find the other four guys that could help me paint that picture. And then with also the violin and the cello in the chorus that Cory beefed up and made fucking perfect, man. And so like all those elements, whether even the sitar, which I forced loud in the mix, it's like, each one is a brushstroke and that picture is finely painted, but I've had it, imagine 15 years, imagine have something in your head for 15 years, but you can't, that it's great, but you can't get it out. And the drum beat has changed over 3 demos over those 15 years, complete different vibes almost, but with the one simple melody,
Yeah, that's Snake Charmer, which is off the upcoming Apocalypse Blues record.
Title track.
Let me ask, as a drummer, how are some of these songs starting in your head? Because for me, as a violinist, I'll think of a melody that's suited to violin. Are you thinking of lyrics? Are you thinking of a groove? Or is it everything?
No, it's the oddest thing. I literally, usually, if I'm purposely writing, then it's a riff, and I'll have to pick up the bass and make a riff that comes in my head, and then I try and figure it out. But mostly, the last all these songs that comprise the Snake Charmer album, I dream these crazy dreams, and I wake up right in the morning, and that's when I'll have the earworm, and I'll usually, especially in the hotel room, is when it's an odd thing because just right when I'm right in between sleep and waking, so it's not as if, and I would literally, you can look at them, like Ben even could see it, like how fast I'm trying to write because it's just pouring out like line after line and clever lines. So I was like, this fucking lyric, I will say it out loud, I wrote it, it's great, but I don't feel like I wrote it because it's, I can say it's great because I didn't write it. It came from fucking somewhere else.
Yeah, there's something magical about that time, when you are just coming out of sleep. And we even had Miles Kennedy, a phenomenal lyricist and singer, say literally the exact same thing. He said he'd wake up and there'd be this like kind of half dream state, and he'd have to like convince himself to get out of bed, go in the other room, and make a little voice memo of a melody or write some lyrics down, and then go back to bed and go and sleep. But there's something about the creative side of your brain, I think, when you first wake up, where all the reality hasn't fully set in yet, so you're kind of a little more lucid in
that area in between sleep and waking is when the veil or the wall goes down. Like when you go to sleep, the only time you can access your subconscious is when you're asleep or knocked the fuck out. And so, or that 1 second of orgasm. then the veil comes down too and allows you your subconscious. And so, you know, when you so that area, that gray area right in between sleeping and waking, it's not, you don't have your full control of it, but that's why you have to rush. We have to rush, people like Miles and me. We got to run in. Like, I always have something right by my bed, usually, especially in a hotel room, pen and paper, you know, because it's closing. The veil is closing, right? And so you got to hurry up because this shit is going to stop, and then your subconscious is going to shut down again. So, you know, as we walk around, looking around every day, you know, our subconscious is recording everything. Like, our brains are way more powerful than any computer, any supercomputer. We use 10% of our brains. You all know this, you know. And so our subconscious is super smart. Like, if we could all access our subconscious at will, just in our conscious state, then we'd all have photographic memories, you know?
I call that twilight area. I call it like the mental buffer. It's like the mental cache, because it's like, that's when I realized it was my subconscious, because I kind of write the same way. I don't want to claim to be remotely as good as you are, but I have that feeling like it's coming from a place. It's coming from something else. It's like a conduit. Like when I play piano, I don't use my active mind at all. I'm just like, with guitar, I have to actually think, which is why I probably suck, you know. But I know that it's coming from somewhere. But when I read it back, I'm like, okay, this motherfucker's been listening to me, and I realize I'm like, oh, it's just my brain being divisive, like everything else in this world. You know, it's my subconscious, and then you realize that little area is kind of like your mental cache. It's like your buffer between your waking brain and the brain that's recording everything, but that goes running around while you sleep.
Sure. And
Sure.
Lawson, you're a very humble and charming man, but your talent is way, you never give yourself enough credit, especially as a songwriter, you know. And it's not, you know, you say something that not as good as me or whatever. It's not about good and bad, you know. I mean, there's shit, you know, some dude, but you obviously wouldn't be in my band if you weren't on a next level.
Well, listen, no, I know I bring a lot to the table, but your lyrics are...
There's that humble, charming Ben.
Yeah, totally humble. I'm amazing. You're right. But let me go on about my idea. When I read Jack the Tripper, I really I wish I could just bring it up. Like, I read it out loud. I always read your stuff out loud, because when I read it in my mind, it's never the same as like when I hear myself actually saying the syllables and all the things. I'm like, that's clever. That's clever. Again, and your subconscious is super clever. So I guess what I'm saying is, it isn't about good or better, but I don't know if my subconscious is as clever as your subconscious, at least lyrically. Maybe in other ways. I
gotta admit that, you know, everyone that tells me that people talk about me behind my back, they all say that he's fucking clever. That one.
I feel like Tyler Durden. So what's that like? What? Being clever. Fight Club, anyone? No?
Oh, yeah. We don't talk about that.
I tell you what, though, when you're writing lyrics, though, with all joking aside, you know, I do, once, like you asked about Cory, about the whole, is that the majority of the writing? Well, these are just the sparks that happen usually. I'll get a melody and a verse. Sometimes a whole, like Jack the Tripper was a whole verse. And the funny thing about Jack the Tripper was, before I had that little, you know, moment and got given those lyrics, those great, clever lyrics that I love to this day, like I'm wondering all of them too. Like I don't, you know, like I said to Benny when I first wrote it, I'm like, God, you know, because I sent it right to the guys, which I usually don't do, because I'll usually work a song. So anyway, I'll get the spark and scribble it down, and then later on, even trying to read what I wrote, and then it comes back, because cadence, and I know how to write, like I'll put a pause in between a word, and then later on when I'm reading it back, I'll say, oh, that word's farther away, the last word, so I know there's a pause there, and then I'll have a line if I want the word like elongated when it comes to me, right? So that I can go back to it. But that's where the work starts, because then now I got some kind of melody I got to have, I usually know the cadence. And so I'll usually start with a melody, and then the bass has to come out, but as far as drum beats, man, I always have that right away, because I think that happens. It just happens. Like I know.
You think in rhythm.
Yes, I think in rhythm.
Well, it's funny because a lot of the times you go, I know the song, I just don't know the notes. And I'm like, that doesn't make any fucking sense because I have no rhythm. But you understand the rhythm. So I think melodically first, and you think rhythmically first. And then you're like, I need to put it to it. And hold on. By the way, I wish you guys could see how beautifully this is written out. I hope you don't mind, Shannon, but can I read the first verse of Jack the Tripper?
Yeah, you can read the first verse. You can read it. I like it.
One time, then the next time, and the last time too. It's scary and it's funny, but it's deep as the ocean's blue. Try digging you a hole and filling it back. There's never enough dirt. Who knows where it's at? Where did it go? The Tripper knows, but Jack don't say a word. He turns that dirt into gold. He puts youth back into the old. And while the masses run away, reality is a shallow grave. Jack the Tripper's broken all the molds.
It's about alchemy. And Jack the Tripper's an alchemist.
Ah.
But it'll become evident later in the song.
Is this for the next record?
Yeah, sing him the second verse, though. It's better.
Going back there, I have a lot of Shannon Larkin media. Hold on.
These are all infants, by the way. I call all my songs infants. Because what he's reading, it will change.
So I'll continue. I'll just read this for you guys. It's amazing. She's a he, and he's a her, and I'm a you. A picture paints 1,000 words. A mirror very few. Hold on to a fleeting thought that turns into an idea.
Cadence. A picture.
Cadence.
You established he has no rhythm, so.
Hold on. But if you don't pause at the break, because you have to go, a picture paints 1,000 words. A mirror, very few. A picture paints 1,000 words. A mirror, very few.
Oh, wow. That's way better than what Ben did.
Remarkably different from Ben's rendition. Yeah.
I don't want to ruin it anymore.
No, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hold on to a fleeting thought that turns into idea. Once it's gone, it never may come back. Where did it go? The Tripper knows. But Jack just smiles and doesn't say a word. He's turning dirt back into gold and putting youth back in the old. And while the masses run away, reality's a shallow grave. Jack the Tripper breaks another mold. And he must dance and necromance. And still we dance and make romance. This we need and that we want, but anything will do. Picking ripe epiphanies that tell us what to do. Once informed, the logic is to process every thought, trying to make sense of everything that we've been taught. It's like Edgar Allan Poe.
It really is. Yeah.
And guess what? Let me say this. I get to brag because Terry Carter comes to see me one time. This was, I think it was definitely the only time I've seen him since we recorded the record. And he came down, a couple weeks after we got done, before I left for Europe. And he was picking up some gear anyway, and he goes, "Hey, got a song title for you, Jack the Tripper." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome, man! I'll write something." And then it wasn't until Europe when I woke up in that hotel room in fucking Jesus, I can picture it, but I don't know what country it was. And I had it, and that's why I texted all y'all those lyrics. I was so happy with that, because again, like those lyrics, they'll all change, but I'll get a song, so like I have the breakdown and everything, and it's pretty trippy.
Are you? It sounds to me like you're also envisioning the melody to an extent when the lyrics come to you. Is that right? Or is it more like the cadence of the rhythm, or are you hearing notes as well?
No, I got melody. It's melody, and I have the melody. But I don't know. It sounds right now, the cadence and the melody are very limerick. limerickal. You know, it sounds very like Irish. You know what I mean? La da
I
da
see.
da 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 da. Jack the Tripper's breaking all the rules, and he must dance. You know, but I do have some melodies that I like.
You can definitely, in reading them, you're like, this is not just a poem. It's lyrics, because you can almost hear it evoking a melody, even if I'm not hearing the same melody that you're hearing. It's very whimsical and musical.
What I like to do, and what makes some of my songs weird, that, I mean, if you look at the normal music out there right now that is popular, then you hear the Apocalypse Blues is that first record, and that's weird sounding shit, right? And it's hard to categorize, even though the new one is way better. And I think it's alternative is how the only way we can really categorize the band, because while it has aspects of blues and classic rock, certainly psychedelic acid rock, you know, it's got this eclectic mix. I feel the thing I'm most proud about on the whole record, listening to it as a whole, is that it's still cohesive and it sounds like a band. Like it does. It sounds, we might be doing ragtime into a big fat, wah wah lead, you know what I mean? Or I don't know, Phrygian scales into fucking, samba beat chorus like Steely Dan or something, you know what I mean? So it's very eclectic, but I just feel like, and why I'm most proud of it is the cohesion. It doesn't sound like Frank Zappa. Like it's not.
Well,
Frank
it's more like a band like
Yeah.
Queen. I know that sounds pretentious, but like
yes,
Queen could have so you have like Night at the Opera where you have Bohemian Rhapsody and the Prophet Song. They're like these 5, 6, 8 minute opuses, but then you have like Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon, which is almost like musette or vaudevillian, and then you have like 39, which is literally just an acoustic ballad that sounds like it's 1940s-y. Like, and that's Queen. And that's kind of, and I agree with you that whether you love this band, you hate this band, it sounds like this band.
There you hit it. We're Queen.
Oh my God! You're gonna put that in a thing.
You're
Betty said
Freddie.
that, oh my God!
I think that a big part of that is the way that you conceptualized recording the record itself. The fact that it was just a band in a studio for a week, making that happen. A lot of things nowadays are recorded piecemeal and in multiple places and over months or weeks and stuff, as we know with Lost Symphony. So it can be difficult to keep that cohesiveness, when you're putting together, especially like a full length album. But we went into the studio and you set your drums up and we recorded all those songs without moving the drums. They're in that room. They have that sound. We had, Terry Carter and we had Brian, we had all that. It was the same setup. It was the same environment, and all those songs, even though it's an eclectic group of songs, and it's a wild ride, from one end to the other of the album. It was all done by a band in a studio in a week. I think it was your vision of the way you recorded the record that gives it that that cohesiveness and that sound of the Apocalypse Blues revival.
It sounds like the same band every song, even though the songs are vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't even speaking of the actual production of it. Is just fantastic. That was you and Benny, Mike, and that shit. A great studio, a great drummer. We got the best drum sounds I've ever got. I'm not saying, I can say great drummer because I've done 40 records, so I know how to hit a drum in the studio. You know
You're
what I mean?
pretty good at it.
So I'm not bragging or something. I'm saying it was a combination of the way you might did.
Well, can we talk about this for a moment? Because Cory and I just want to say thank you, because we don't really get the opportunity, having home studios in our basements, to be able to walk into a place like the place we went in Fort Myers, where you have this giant old school drum room and have a world famous drummer who's incredible set up an incredible Yamaha kit, and then allow us to take $50,000 of microphones and be like, hey man, should we put these paired U87s up really high and see what it sounds like? And then go into a Mitsubishi/Neve console with all these crazy outboard gear. So Cory and I were just like, wow, that does sound like $1 million of shit. Because it to us, it's like, it sounded like the audio demo when I used to take people into Best Buy and be like, would you like to buy these $15,000 speakers? And they're like, what do you have? I'm like, Phil Collins is playing the drums. Like, that's what it sounds like in a sound studio, but your drums. And Cory and I were allowed to get to work with you in this beautiful environment. And I say thank you, because we never know how good can be, and you showed us.
Well, I'll say this. I've recorded drums in studios in Europe, all over the world. And, Duncan's Dream Studio 9 has a great drum room, I mean. But, again, the player, the drums, those Yamaha Absolute Customs oak wood drums, they were already my favorite recording drums in 36 years of making records or whatever. And so then, like I said, you got to give it to Cory and you, because, y'all mic'd it together. I remember just seeing, it all go down. It was all going down so quick for me, because I knew I was already focused on the song that I was playing first, Breaking Out of the Machine, right? And I had all the changes that I wanted from the demo, having heard the demo so much, rewriting the fucking lyrics, all that shit. And so in my head, I knew exactly what I wanted to play and where, and I knew the arrangement like the back of my hand. However, I just never practiced it. That's like played it in the garage before I go in the studio, which I usually do. I like to be well rehearsed. I still improv like a motherfucker. It's just in that band I can, where like Godsmack I can't. My main thing is certain words are on the kick and the snare. It's almost like rap in that way.
Well, the drums are like your acoustic guitar. It's the truth, because like, I mean, when I write a song or whatever, I will write a part, but I need Paul Lorenzo, the drummer in Lost Symphony, our band. I need him to come and like make sense of what I'm doing, so then I can go re-record it in time now, because I'll play to him. You start where Paul comes in for me, and you think with a rhythm first, but it's so thought out. It's crazy to think you do a 6-minute song all just on the drums, but watching you play, where I say a one-take Larkin, that's
the thing, though. There is a method, though. Like I said, it's many days when I get obsessed, and then I end up in my studio back here for days on end and punching in my bass with my foot, and it always starts the same way. I'll do the song. It's not a first take. I'm not going in there and, I do the drums good for the demos that I make. And then I'll put the bass on and some really bad vocals, because I'm not a good singer, and send it to Shane. Is usually how every song on this thing went, except for In Here was different, because, see, there was 4 songs that Bombola was with me still. And it was before pre-Terry Carter. And that was Breaking Out of the Machine, Skinny
For
the
those
Mushroom Fair.
watching, hold on, just really quickly. Tony Rambola, the incredible #1 guitarist in all of hard rock and metal right now, in Godsmack with the hit single Surrender, was also in the Apocalypse Blues revival before what originally was in Wrathchild America, and Wrathchild back in the 80s was Shannon, Terry Carter. So you have these 2 incredible guitarists in your life that are orbiting around this band.
Yeah, man. How about that? How lucky of a dude am I? Yeah, I've been doing these benefit things to try and help the hurricane down here. And I was a judge with Dave Fortman, by the way. Dave Fortman and I judged this American Idol style, as well as Jean Beauvoir. There's always stories, right? And like, here's a positive one, because most of the funny things that happened at that first, there was 2 rounds of this competition, right? And so, and it was broad daylight. And so I'm kind of hanging around the back. Me and Fortman are hanging around the side of the building, right? And then the stage is over on the other side in this big field. There was only like 150 people there or something, but it had $25 a pop. Every we get raised like $3,000 to give to local musicians who lost their shit, like Brian Carpenter did in this hurricane, And anyway, the funny thing is, so they go, all right, let's bring them up here, the judges, right? And then there was the first guy who I don't know him, and so he was a local, like maybe producer guy or whatever, and then and they said him and who he produced and all this stuff, and then they said, and Shannon Larkin, Godsmack, and they did their research. They said Godsmack, Ugly Kid Joe, and some other. They said like Candle by some band I wasn't in, but I played for or whatever, and so in the crowd said 150 people, you know what I mean, and so the first guy went, and then he sits down at the table, American Idol style, right in front of the stage, right, 4 chairs. So he goes and sits down there, and then after he was introduced and spoke, and then so I got up, Shannon Larkin, Godsmack, Ugly Kid Joe, Ozzy, and fucking and then so I said my thing, and I sit down, and you have to walk off the stage this way. You go down these stairs and walk in front of the stage where the table is, right? And so as I'm walking down, I get down, I sit down. The MC goes, Dave Fortman. No one clapped. No one clapped. No one knows who Dave Fortman is. And Dave knows that. He goes, what the fuck? Like, and Dave went up and said, hey, I'm Dave. And, and he had to say it himself. I produced, Evanescence and Slipknot or whatever. But if the dude would have went, he produced Godsmack, Evanescence, Slipknot, Mudvayne, whatever.
He got a shitty intro.
He's got his name on 60 million records out there. You know what I mean? And then the crowd would have went, hey, that's why he's a judge at American Idol style competition. There was singers and whatever. And he was very great judge. Like he was the one, like I'd be like, yeah, you were rad and you had the presence, and your voice was way mature beyond its years or whatever. And then he would go, yeah, everything he said, but, if constructive criticism, and he goes into like, at the end of your lines, you're going flat every time, and you watch out for that and shit like that. He was he was really good at it. Until after like the 5th Stella Artois.
Artois.
Yeah. Then he started. I was like, oh no! And they were these big cans, like at the festivals, And I was like, oh no, man! And he was like, man, I can't even. Or the one redneck dude came out and played, and his song was horrible, and it was this older dude, and Dave's like, I love this dude from Louisiana, and a great song, dude. And I'm like, dude, that sucks.
In other words, if Dave's judging a competition, you want to go on later and let him get into the mood of.
Oh, yeah.
Sober Dave, not as good on the ears as 5 Stella Artois Daves in.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, he's funny either way. That dude's a funny dude. I always told him, especially in Ugly Kid Joe when he was younger too, he smoked pot all the time then. And then something changed and it started putting him to sleep. So he's like, yeah, I don't want to smoke pot anymore. So the great Dave Fortman doesn't even smoke weed anymore. I say that because when I joined Ugly Kid Joe, that was his thing. And like Dave always had joints rolled. He had shit done. He just loved weed. And California, we had good weed too. And Dave was the dude. Like when you would go to he even had a home studio, and he made his garage into a studio in which Ugly Kid Joe even recorded in all this shit. Did a video there. But and it was like going in a Snoop studio. You know what I mean? When you walked in Fortman's studio, man, it just that was it. Snot did their first demos there. I remember, and it smelled like weed. And Lynn loved his weed too, by the way. And I'd go to the Snot House, and buy weed from Lynn straight. Like he'd sell me weed. He wasn't a dealer or anything. He would just sell me weed because he'd have extra weed, and I'd call him up, man, you got any weed, man? He's like, well, I'll sell you some of mine.
I met Lynn straight for 35 seconds. He walked off stage and he had a blunt in his hand and he handed it to me. And then he signed my thing and we smoked a blunt and he was like, how old are you? And I'm like, 15. He's like, good. And like handed it back to me. And I smoked with him. I'm like, dude, I just smoked with the singer from Snot. And then he passed away. And I'm like, I remember thinking, oh my God, I had that moment with that guy. And I sent you a picture recently because I found in my attic, I had all my old t-shirts. I had my Ozfest 1998 shirt that I never wore. And on it was signed from Lynn Straight, who, if you guys go onto eBay and try to look, you can't find his autograph. He didn't sign for very long. He wasn't famous for very long. You can't find a lot of his stuff. And I had his autograph to me on my shirt. And it made me smile because I think it's been like, was it 22 years the other day?
Yeah.
So to Lynn Straight in the heavens above us and the Snot guys.
Shannon, you were on with Mikey Doling a while back. So if you guys want, all the Snot stories, make sure you go check out those episodes.
Oh my God.
We'll put some links in the description. Those are an absolute riot. You guys, you guys were animals.
Well, I'll throw this out too about Mikey because little shout out, he sends me, we've had this mutual adoration for each other's work. Like him, not me, that's the drummer for Godsmack. You know what I mean? He was always into, my side projects and, we were really close in Santa Barbara around the Snot days and all that, and so as a result of that, we trust each other enough to send our babies, to each other before they're mixed or whatever. And so Mikey will send me new songs, that he has in his band. Wyote is amazing.
They're awesome.
I mean, he just sent me a new song 2 days ago. He did the same thing to me. He said, I sent him a cover that we did of Over the Mountain because I found it on my computer. I'm like, this is really good.
Really cool, guitar effect in the verse, and it has
dude.
I love the ascending riff and the chorus. It's just really
super
cool.
melodic, but also heavy as fuck.
Yeah.
And a little bit weird. It's great. He's such a good songwriter.
Yeah, it's weird. That singer is it's that dude, he's albino. And he sings for
Are you talking about Gemini syndrome? Or is that
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Aaron.
I have very few dear friends that I respect so much as writers of songs, you know what I mean? And the vice versa thing too. He's one of my friends that, because let's say it, I'm known and my legacy will be drums and I'm just a drummer, and I'm proud of that. I love that, and that was a peak, you know what I mean? And it's all going to culminate, in my rock dream. I didn't dream as a kid of going and having a cult following and playing warm theaters because they sound better and you can feel the energy better from the crowd. I wanted to fucking play stadiums and be as big as the Rolling Stones. You know what I mean? That was my thing. I want to be a fucking rock star. I want to be the Who. I want to be Keith Moon,
Did you ever blow up your drum set like Keith Moon? Is Tony deaf?
No. But I trashed my drum set a couple times, a la Keith Moon. And didn't even remember it. And I threw everybody out of the studio. Fuck you and get out of my studio and all this. And I don't even remember it. But that's why I'm sober for 6.5 years.
Well, good for you. Yeah, congratulations, by the way,
absolutely.
on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Of all things, I have to say that from my personal experience, I mean, hey, look, I'm not everyone knows their limits, but alcohol is always the thing that I find that consumes people the most. I mean, everybody has their own vices, but every time, like, my job has been to be a DJ for like 15 years. So like I've always been the sober guy looking at a bunch of drunk people, and like nothing good ever comes of it. I ended up at the police station identifying people more times than I'd care to admit, just working in downtown Boston as a DJ.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a good perspective.
Yeah, alcohol is it's true, and some people believe that it's a gene, and you can actually, be born with this gene that some people have and some people don't. Addictive personality, and some of us, I wish that I wish I didn't have that gene, because I love to drink, and I loved it, and I miss it. But I'm smart enough to know that it was my demise. And, I did some crazy shit that, isn't me, wasn't me. And that I don't regret anything, but I'm certainly not proud of. And, as I get older, I want to be proud of every fucking thing. I want to, love every breath I take.
Yeah, it's amazing advice. It's so true.
Well, I will say that I'm very excited that Shannon. So when I first met Shannon, he made good. His demos that he's made have gotten so exponentially better since the first stuff. So even in the last 2 years or year and a half or what have you, his demos have gotten better. But I've always said to him, "Hey Shannon, how come you don't make like better sounding stuff? You're a rock star. Just you have a great kit." And he finally called me, said, "Benny, can you make a studio for me? Like, so I could do this here?" And I called Cory right up and I said, "Cory,
can you make a studio for Shannon?
Can you make a studio for Shannon?
Solution to all problems.
Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right?" And I'm so excited that we actually get to help you with where we're good, because I know that when you get enabled to be able to bring your ideas where you can make them sound like they sound in your head yourself, that you're going to be so much happier, that you're going to feel like your own boss in your own house.
Yeah, and you know what? And since you and Terry have joined the band too, I've learned so much more just about, like, I used to just write these songs and I didn't care what notes they were. I just found them what I heard from the melody I'd sing. I know the riff in my head, and I can go down the neck, ding, 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 there it is, and find it. And I don't know that that's A or whatever, or didn't. Now I do. At least I'm learning the basics of at least being able to say to you guys, yeah, it's an A, and then I go to fucking C sharp on the bridge or whatever. You know what I mean? Rather than it's this, dude. And I'm trying to show Terry fucking Carter, who's a nerd genius like you and knows all I'm trying to show him the riff of Skinny and the Mushroom Fairy.
Well,
anyway,
Siobhán's the craziest.
Funny.
You can play anything, and she'll literally be like, "Oh, that is the Hirajoshi scale, but you added some of the minor pentatonic in there, so there's, I guess it's the the minor pentatonic over it."
Yeah, but that can be very limiting. I wish I were more like Shannon sometimes, where it's like I'm free of the knowledge of music theory.
Well, yeah, you're stifled, but this is the opposite. So Siobhán is the other side of the spectrum, where you're set free. You're like, "Oh, there's a mode. I'll frolic amongst this mode." Siobhán's stifled by, do I use the Lydian mode? Do I use the Dorian mode? The Mixolydian mode?
With crippling indecision, and then do none of the above.
Because she knows so many things. It's like all these different choose your own adventure pages when you're just like, I'm going to keep turning the page. It's amazing.
Yeah, but, in all seriousness, watching you play, Siobhán, you went away. I don't think any theory was in your head. It was then, passion and
that's true.
knowledge.
I think when you're surrounded by the people that sort of put that energy forward, it does change it for you too. I mean, when I'm by myself in my own head, it's one thing, but I was changed with all of you.
Jedi Terry was yelling, "Can she play quarter tones?" So if you don't know what that is, if you haven't tuned your sitar lately, Siobhán came up with quarter tones because, Terry thinks he's being cool. And meanwhile, she totally created this snake charmer vibe, like pulled it out of her brain. And it was amazing to watch Shannon. And then Terry had just met her at that moment. He's like, wow. Oh, we're dealing with a good one here. He was just amazed. And he's not the kind of guy that would be right off the bat, oh, she's great. Like, okay, we can do something with this.
But Terry Carter, he definitely knows what's great and what he likes. And, I've known him since I was 8 years old, and he was raised on exactly because we were raised together on rock and roll in the same exact band. So like anything, even when I went off, he'd go off in the left field in the blues world and be turning me on to all these guys. And I went in the fucking right field in the punk world and would turn him on to all these punk bands, And since we would tour the country in bands and stuff, we all have like whoever was driving behind the wheel for 5-6 hour shifts, in a band tour, they control the stereo. You see? And so as we were coming up, touring literally in a band for 12 years together, you know what I mean? It was just who could turn who onto the next thing, you know what I mean? And so this whole thing of having him in the band again with me, I'm so blessed. Me and you, Benny, I tell you what, that dude will get us heard, you know what I mean? Like, I believe it. And I'm not crazy. Even the great Steve Wood heard it, and he really liked us and wrote me a very nice text message with details. You could tell he really listened to it. And the standout thing was, and your guitar player is phenomenal. And I could just hear Steve Wood's English accent. He's been on the show. Y'all know and love him.
Yes.
He's our British ambassador.
Yes.
Yes, he is. He's the raddest, and hopefully he'll be involved in our lives, in this band, the Apocalypse. We would sure love to have him, but on board, we got things to talk about. I'll come back. I know that we're at the end of the rope here, but I'll come back on 2020.
Well, we're really happy to have you,
love
man.
Having you here,
and it's genuinely a pleasure. And so people, if you guys don't know the backstory, Shannon literally came on this show, and we told him we were in our band Lost Symphony, and we sent him a thank you, sent him our records, and Shannon, being the nice guy that he is, he knows as a musician, you listen to other musicians' music if they send it to you, even if it sucks. You at least listen to it and respond. It's kind of a thing. And he messaged me back and he's like, is that really you playing piano? Yeah, on every song. And you recorded this in my basement. Really? Yeah. And he's like, you should join my band. And I literally pined about it for months to Siobhán and Cory. And then I actually joined the band. And when we got to all of us went down, because Siobhán's in Miami. And then Cory, I take Cory everywhere. He's my training wheels anytime I say I'm a producer. We flew down to Fort Myers and we got to hang out with Shannon and do this record with the incredible band that Shannon has surrounded me with. And I have to tell you that I am so humbled. But the funniest part was Shannon one day looked at me, because we talk about a lot of esoteric things like manifestation, like, positive thoughts, like does this matter? And Shannon looked at me like deadpan and said that Benny, I've been waiting for someone like you to be able to help me with my ideas and all that. Like, I manifested you. And I said, no, Shannon, I manifested you. You're the multi-platinum drummer that flew me out here on your dollar to tell me that you manifested me. No, I manifested you. And that was the greatest moment of my life. And I appreciate you for that.
Aww.
Well, I met you right here, man, on this show. And I remember I was like, hey, Boston, man,
that moment. Hey, Boston.
It's so
this is where it all started.
It's so funny, like in this small world like this, like here it is. I end up in a band from Boston, right? And then I have this band from Florida that I started. And then I end up with a keyboardist from Boston. I think that's the coolest thing, Must have had some kind of
full circle.
It does. Where are you,
Well-
Siobhán? Where are you from in the U.S.?
I'm from Michigan originally, yeah. So I'm Midwestern, and then right now I'm in Ohio, but I ended up in Florida. So, but yeah, Michigan girl,
Yeah, well, you ended up in the right place. I'll tell you.
indeed.
Florida, baby. That's what I'm talking about. I don't
That's
care.
right.
Hurricanes, we got it all down here, but
Yeah.
I love it and won't leave. You know, bring it on. I don't care. My
I don't
girls
blame you. I don't blame you because it is cold as shit outside here in Massachusetts. So I'm very jealous.
got a couple more brutal months, my friend.
Yes, we do.
And you know, the funny thing about, Florida now, like I'm a Floridian. I've lived here like close to 20 years, So, it actually, like even Rambola, he moved down here like, I don't know, 12, 13, 15 years ago, something. And when we were in Europe in October, we were all like, me and Tony were just so cold. And it wasn't really that cold. It was down in 40, 30 degrees or whatever, but it wasn't that bad. Scotland was pretty rough. But anyway, me and him particularly were just scarves and gloves and knit hats.
True Floridians.
Like, damn, dude. Yeah. And I'm like, that's it. And Tony's like, damn, because he's from, New Hampshire. And so he's like, oh, man, my skin got thin. That's what happens. You acclimate. I think it's true, like, because I remember.
It is. I believe that.
Oh yeah. Well, you have to go into like
Happened to me
a
too.
hyperbaric chamber every day called Boston. You get used to being in like the freezing cold. So when it's only like 15 degrees and hurting your face, you're like, at least it's not negative 30 wind chills.
Yeah, man. I've spent a good many winters there, and ironically, it just always ended up that Godsmack will record in the winter when we did our records up there. And I mean, me and Tony staying at the Holiday Inn in Salem, which was the closest place to our studio or whatever, and Rambola, being from up there, and we'd be driving back from the studio at night, and he's going like, I don't know, normal speed, but it looked like, like Star Trek when they hit warp speed, in space.
Yeah, it's snow.
And the snow looked like that to me, and I'm like, I can't see 2 feet in front of me. And he's like, oh, I'm like, Jesus, man, I'm like clutching the seat, And Rambola's like, oh, I grew up in this shit, and whatever. I'm like, let me wish everybody watching this happy holidays too, and
Yes.
embrace
You too,
it,
man.
embrace it, enjoy it, wonder and awe.
Wonder and
Wonder
awe.
and awe.
That's the
Wonder
theme
and
of
awe.
all
Yeah.
of this.
Shannon, thank you so much, man. It's always a
And it
pleasure.
was
man.
awesome to
Thank
have
you.
you back. Enlightening
Thank
as
you.
always. You're the best.
Check out 2020-d.com, like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next week.
How about this? We had the Snot House, right? All the guys in Snot lived together in one house,
Yes.
okay? And we rehearsed next to the local strip club next door. So we'd be jamming in the day, take a break and go into the strip club and pull the strippers out. Oh yeah, they'd be wanting to hang out with us because they're Snot. And they'd come and watch us jam, and then we'd take them back to our apartment, or not apartment house, to the Snot House, and they would buy us all groceries, and they had money, we didn't.